Okay, well, my name's Greg Froman. I'm a photographer also, like some of the other people here. My wife and I, Nancy, over the last 30 years, we've traveled the world. We've been to everywhere you can think of. We keep on trying to find more out of the way places to go to. We've been to hike the Inca Trail and saw Mount Machu Picchu when the sun was coming up before all the tourists got in. We've scuba dived in Thailand and Belize. We've been to Patagonia, and we were in Bali during the bombing, when the terrorist bombing happened. I mean, we've been all over the world. Last 3 weeks ago, we just got back from Namibia, Africa, and it's probably one of the best trips we've been on in the last 20 years. I mean, it was just, everything was just beautiful. We went with 8 other photographers. We went with a famous German photographer who took us these places that he's been to before, so it took a lot of the stress out of knowing where to be and at certain times of the day and things like that. But it was just an incredible trip. The last probably 3 trips we've been on, we've gone on what they call photography trips. So it's dedicated to photography, because I always got so frustrated that we'd be on trips, and they were great trips, and we'd be to these great places, but they would have breakfast and then we'd go out and, you know, during the day and take pictures. Well, no, you need to get dramatic lighting. You need to be, you know, when the sun's coming up or when the sun's going down, or maybe in the night, you know, like when we're in Namibia, we're out in the middle of the night at 2:30 in the morning taking pictures of the Milky Way. So, I mean, it has to do with, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about the different aspects of photography, and one of them is light. Light is everything. Yeah. You know, just like on some of these other photographs that we've seen. That's what makes a photograph. You know, with the invention of the smartphone, everyone thinks they're a photographer, and I think that's great. I mean, you think about when we were growing up, we didn't take photographs hardly at all. Now everyone takes photographs, and I think that's great. But really, to have a passion for photography, you take these different basic building blocks to make something that's really, truly epic, and something you can blow up and show your friends and tell stories about when you get old and you forget about everything else like that. And a lot of it has to do with composition, and to me the main thing is lighting. So lighting is everything. So being in the right place at the right time, that's not luck, that's planning. Ansel Adams once said, you know, I always think it's a famous quote, he goes like, to take a good photograph, you have to be in the right place. You have to be standing in the right place to take a photograph. That sounds very simple, simplistic type of statement, but what he's really saying is you need to plan for it. You need to go and scout out the place, walk around, see different angles of looking at things, and not just take your camera and stick it up and take a snapshot. That's not a photograph to me. Photograph is looking at the light, seeing where the sun's coming from. Is it gonna be better at tonight when the sun's going down, or is it gonna be better in the morning? A lot of that has, and it's never an exact science. That's what makes it so challenging, and that's why I think the older I get, the more I have a passion for doing it. Nancy's real patient as far as going on some of these trips with me, because she's not a photographer, but she takes great photographs with her smartphone. But she still loves going on these trips with us, because it's not just taking the photograph, it's being in that experience. And me being mostly a landscape photographer, but I do take pictures of people and things, also other types of subjects. But for me, the passion of taking a photograph is being able to capture a moment and bringing it back and showing people what you saw. And sometimes it's not a split second like that photograph is showing. It's like that whole time that you were there that night, maybe seeing the stars and the Milky Way over your head, or watching the sunset and watching these glows on the mountaintops or something like that, and trying to capture that in a split second. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that, and that's what part of the passion of photography is. We just got back from Namibia. I don't have any of those photographs to show right now, but I got a couple of photographs, these 2 right here. This was a couple of years ago when we were in the Italian Dolomites. And a lot of people go like, wow, you were pretty lucky to get that, you know, right when the sun was coming up, you know, and you got the great shadows. No, this is another one of these things where there's a lot of planning involved. We were with a photography group. We woke up at 5 a.m. in the middle of the night. I mean, it was still pitch black out. We had headlamps on. We drove out to this site. we had to hike all the way around this lake over here to get to this position, get everything set up, and wait for the sun to come up. And then I probably took 50 photographs, you know, at different stages as the sun coming up, and watching these clouds move in, and you know, where the light was going to be just right. So it wasn't just by luck that, you know, this one photograph came out. It was a series of photographs, and this was the one that I liked the best, doing it like that.
They had no idea how insulting, what they said, how insulting it really was. I mean, they just didn't realize.
Well, it's just, some people don't understand it. There's a lot of sweat involved, you know, and you know, wear and tear, and you know, and trauma, and you're pushing yourself trying to get to this place or something like that. But by the time you have something to show for it, that's the prize, I guess, to be able to show something like that. So in this case, it's just kind of some dramatic lighting. The sun was coming up over here. This was probably about 6 a.m. These clouds had moved in, and we're getting this nice glow on the clouds, plus on these, I think these are juniper trees, and they had just been changing colors in the autumn, so they're almost, you know, almost like deciduous trees changing colors. So I took a series of photographs. I did these things called high dynamic range photographs. So if the exposure was right, this might be too dark down here. So I take like 4 or 5 photographs of different exposures, and you combine them together. That way, still has a nice exposure down here, which is in the shade, but it's not overexposed up here. So this is called a high dynamic range photograph like that. But some of the, I guess the aspects of photography that I see in this photograph when you do this, of course the lighting was number one on it. The other thing is composition. You think about, you always want to have a nice foreground. You don't want to have it too cropped off or too far back where there's nothing in the foreground at all. So you want to have something interesting in the foreground. In this case, this seems like it kind of wraps around like that, so it gives a nice kind of arc for the composition for this photograph here. And I always try to tightly crop it as much as I can, where if there's nothing interesting in the photograph, I crop it out so it's not in there. I do like glossy photographs, so I usually use metal or acrylic. This is acrylic right here. This one here is metal. This is another photograph I took when we were in Mesa Verde, Colorado a few years ago. This is another instance where we were there for 2 full days. So we were there in the morning when the sun was coming up. We were there in the afternoon when the sun was going down. We did it 4 times, so morning, night, because the sun was never right. There might be a crowd of tourists going through here at the same time or something like that. So the idea was I tried to want to take a picture where there were no people in it, so it looked like you were the only person there. And also I wanted to get some really dramatic lighting on it like that. So this happened to be in the morning, even though you know, you might get some really dramatic shading, or where this thing would all be in the shade if the sun was really out, and get some really intense contrast in it like that. But so these are just two photographs. I got another one over there, Mesa Arch on the front wall. We won't talk about that, but I've just got to go and rambling right here and talk about some of this stuff like that.
So I love the passion.
So when we go on our trips, we'll like sleep during the day, take naps, because he wants to take sunrise and sunset, because that's the pretty light, the clouds and everything. So
that's a good point. Because the other thing was, in this last tour in Namibia, we also took astrophotography at night. So we had 3 days in a row where we were taking sunset photographs, going to eat dinner, taking 2 hours a nap, waking up at 11 a.m. to meet back at the van to go out to take night photography till 2 or 3 in the morning, come back, go back to sleep, wake up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and get back out before the sun came back up. Wow. We did that 3 days in a row where we got like 2 or 3 hours sleep a night, and tried to take naps during the daytime, I guess, or when we were traveling or something.
You said for that one, you drove and then you had to hike. So
yeah, we had to hike around this lake around here.
How long did you have to drive, and how long did you have to hike?
It was probably about less than an hour drive from our where we were staying up. We were up in the mountains where it happened, and then it probably took another maybe another 45 minutes to walk around the lake.
In the-
But it was all in the dark, you know, we had headlamps on.
That's a lot.
So we kind of got up this everyone was kind of jockeying for position, you know, up on this hill. And you couldn't really see anything. You could see a little bit of, you know, the sky, but you really couldn't see, you know, this lake or anything like that. We just kind of took it. Our guide was telling us, just set up right here and you'll start seeing the sun start coming up. And all of a sudden everything just starts kind of glowing. And that's when you can tell when it's weird. It's like a lot of people want to take pictures when the sun peaks over, you know, when you actually get direct sunlight. The best time is before the sun comes up and everything, it's called alpenglow, and everything just kind of glows. I mean, you get all these weird pastels of purples and oranges and you know, the mountain just seems like the erupt, you know, with all these just wild colors that you wouldn't normally see during the day when you're just getting real contrasty sunlight on it like that. So to me, that the lighting is the big thing, whatever. So, and that's what you're always. I always put captions on my photographs called "Chasing the Light." Mm-hmm. That's what you're doing. You're looking for that light, those dramatic things. And sometimes it might be sun rays coming through a tree or something like that. But that's what you want to capture, those glimpses of, you know, something that might be there for a few seconds and then it's gone. So one of the things I always talk about photography is I'm getting older now. Nancy and I are both retired now, and I'm always a little paranoid about a memory, and I always want to remember, you know, all these places that we've been and tell all these stories that we've been on. And to me, just like music, photographs always jog my memory. I can always tell stories about how I took that picture, what we were doing, how we shared a bottle of wine as we watched the sunset or something like that. So I'm hoping as I get older and I start losing my memory, these things will be like crib notes on our walls, and I can always remember, you know, those great times.
Get a bottle of wine and maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Introduce Nancy. Nancy, go up there.
Oh.
She'll be on video too.
I'm his travel buddy.
Yeah, and sometimes she's my model.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I need to get some scale out there, you know.
Yeah.
I used to have her like teeter out on some cliff or something like that, and lately she doesn't want to do that anymore. I have to do it and have her take the picture. So.
I used to know.
We were talking just a little bit about equipment. I've got a Fujifilm GFX 100S medium format camera, but then I also have a Nikon D850 that I have astro modified that I can take Milky Way shots. And you can see your camera sees a lot more than your eye sees, especially when it's astro modified, and it picks out all these just beautiful colors of the nebulas and stuff in the Milky Way. And then I've got an infrared camera that's been infrared modified that sometimes I'll snap it and I'll do a lot of black and whites usually for it. Something like that. So.
Well, I have a question, Greg. With all of those cameras, did you have to go and actually go to school for them, or did
No.
you just learn hit or miss learn?
I took a couple of classes when I was like at Texas Tech, you know, in college or like that, but most of it, I always tell the story. When I was in high school and I was a senior, I was really big into scuba diving since I was before I got my driver's license, since I was like 13 or something like that. So the first camera I ever had was an underwater camera. It was a Nikonus underwater camera, fully manual. You had to set everything, you know, shutter speed, aperture. You even had to focus it, and you had a big sight on it. You just had to kind of point it in the right, you know, direction of the fish or something like that. But it was a good learning process of learning the fundamentals of photography doing that. And I used that underwater camera for several years before I even got a regular Nikon land camera. But a lot of it was just trial and errors before the internet, so a lot of this stuff you just kind of learned on your own, or you might read in a book or something like that. But I think the last probably 10 or 20 years, like I said, my passion has just exploded, and I'm hoping I'm getting to be a better photographer. And every time we go on another trip, I go, these are my best photographs now. This one, but it's always a learning process, and of course. You know, with digital photography, you don't have a darkroom, you have Photoshop and Lightroom, and that's a whole process there too. I mean, but the idea is I shoot everything in RAW, and you have as much information in that camera as you can swallow up, you know, as you're taking these pictures. And a lot of times you look at the picture on the back of your camera, it doesn't look that good, but I know when I get home, I've got all that information in that picture and I can pull that out, you know, by using these different digital methods in Photoshop, and it's not really altering it a lot of times. It's just bringing out the what you saw at that time, but it's got all that information packed in each picture like that. So
That's very interesting.
Oh, I have a question. I want to make one comment. So when I started to talk, I said, I started with this quote from some glass worker, and he said, glass harnesses light better than any other art medium. And now I am humbled because I hadn't really thought when I read that about photography. I mean,
well, they're different
light is
mediums for
everything
sure.
with
Yeah.
photography.
Well, they're all different mediums like that, but and
Yeah.
I appreciate all the different forms. I mean, glass is
Yeah.
just amazing, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other aspects to photography, of course, like composition, but and color. But light is definitely. It's what I said was very, very arguable. I realize at this point.
Well,
It
your
sounds a little
medium.
naive in retrospect.
Well,
I
anyway,
think
appreciate
it's
it.
because of your medium.
Hey, Greg.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Greg,
Sure.
so much.
Nice to meet you.
That was great.